Welcome to the That Don't Fit podcast, a podcast where we're dedicated to talking about life and life's real issues that cross racial and generational lines. My name is Jared Torrance, and I'm here with my co-host, Andy Farmer. We're friends, we're pastors, we're wanting to help people talk and process life in a crazy world. Welcome to the conversation. All right, welcome back for another episode of That Don't Fit. Today we're going to continue our conversations about how to have productive conversations around race and ethnicity. Last week we talked about the importance of a theological, biblical foundation for having these conversations and how that is of utmost importance. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to that episode because everything we will be discussing hinges on that being there and that being the main basis for why these things matter and how we ought to speak about these things. So this week we're going to look at the role of experience, personal life experience, and how that is one of those, we've been working off that model of the, what are those things called? Travel circles. Of the travel circles, and how there's all these different things coming into the conversations of race and ethnicity, and it's never just a straight shot. And so one of the roads that we're going to come across is everybody's coming into the conversations with personal experience. And Andy, you wanted to start off by telling a story.
Yeah, I was thinking about this and how to jump into it. And this experience came into my mind that I couldn't get out of, and I'm going to take us back to 1994, which I don't want to even know how old you were.
I will keep that a secret.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But so I'm sitting in my house in Upper Darby. We're, if you're not part of our church, we're in the Philadelphia area. And so Upper Darby's a suburb right outside the city. And so I'm sitting in my house, and it's 1994, and PBS was running for the first time this Ken Burns documentary on baseball, baseball fans. So every night I was turning on PBS on my TV. I had 4 channels, and I'm turning on PBS, and I'm watching the show, and we're up to I think they called it the 8th inning, and it was the start of the 1960s, and but the documentary, it opened up with, and I want to date myself here, but the guys of my generation will catch this. The funeral of Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb was one of the great early baseball players. Very controversial, considered to be racist, but and there's debate about that, but a very controversial guy. And so they open up with footage of his funeral, including his casket being taken to the cemetery. Yeah. And I forget the point he was making kind of by that. But what I realized was my great-grandfather was in that video, because my great-grandfather was a pallbearer at Ty Cobb's funeral and had grown up with him in North Georgia. And so I'm sitting there if you picture, I'm sitting there in my house in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, watching a video on PBS from 1960 of my great-grandfather, who had died in the late 60s, who I only knew a little bit from going up to their house. But it was just this surreal experience, and I remember thinking, man, you can't get away from your past.
Yeah.
It's part of who you are, and it's, and I wasn't trying to. I wasn't even thinking about it, but I realized, that world is part of my world. That I've come from there. Those people, they were mountain folks, and up in North Georgia, and those are my people, and then kind of in my mind even there, what was that like? What? Because I had moved, I had changed in life, but I was still tied very much to that heritage. And the reason I bring that up here is because I feel like that we think about this idea of personal experience, and we kind of think about what's happened to me, and that's a very important part of personal experience. We all have memories of things happened to us, or things that we had or didn't have, or those kind of things. But we also have this more almost intangible sense of personal history that's embedded in where we've come from. Yeah. And I think a lot of conversation about race discounts not just personal experience that we remember having, but where we've come from.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where I kind of went with this and started to realize, yeah, I gotta think about myself in a bigger way than just my personal experience. There's a tendency to sort of say, I never experienced that, or it never happened to me, or that,
Right.
or whatever,
Yeah.
or I never saw that happen, and then
Yes.
sort of say that it must not be real.
Right.
But there's a whole history, man. That history for me is my folks, they grew up in the Jim Crow era. They, it was a segregated South back then. I remember growing up in the segregated South. I remember being in Atlanta, when Dr. King was killed, and just kind of knowing the experience of kind of walking through that as a white kid in 1968, and those things and how they shape you. And so as we jump into this topic, I just wanted to kind of just open it up with let's just talk about some shaping realities, not just maybe things that we remember ourselves, but some shaping realities. Maybe JT, I've given you one, and I can give some more, but just shaping realities for you that sort of, this is who I am based on these things.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think, I feel like my parents did a really good job of preparing us to live as minorities in America. We had a lot of conversations about, how to present ourselves, a lot of conversations about we've got to always put our very, very, very best foot forward, and just preparing us in a way of just, the talks that we would have before going out to Walmart, or, we weren't allowed to go to Walmart in our sweatpants. We always had to put our jeans on and get nicer shirts on and things like that. And, because my mom's around with 4 little kids and things like that. And, people are coming with assumptions to seeing those types of things. And just, I think we've just always had to be a step above and beyond all the people around us, because, the perception in reality is that when people see you, they're going to see you as a little bit lesser than. Yeah. And, so we have to come in combating that already. And so our parents just always encouraged us to, walk with dignity, be dignified, and be extra respectful and certain things like that. Go the extra mile to, to help others see us in a way that's a bit more appropriate to who we are. So I think that's always kind of been there, just kind of that sort of like parenting model of putting our best foot forward and things like that. I'm trying to think of a person okay. So for example, you have those kind of talks growing up, and I remember the first time I got called the N-word was when I was in 3rd grade. And, I was in the lunchroom with some friends, and we got into an argument, and, everybody kind of has that in their back pocket as the ultimate insult that will take you out no matter what. And he used that term, and, it's the first time you actually question, like, am I other? It's where kind of all the preparation that your parents have for you and different things like that. So where it all kind of comes to reality when that word is flung at you. Yeah. You're just like, oh man, I am like outside of majority culture. I am different. I am other. And and you question things and you kind of wrestle through that. And on a separate note, having a conversation about my parents with just our skin color and what we're like, and why certain things are the way they are. Growing up, my parents I think they did a really good job of just like prepping me that things are going to be different, I hope that answers some
well, as you're talking, man, I'm listening, I'm thinking, I don't think my background gives me a sense of the power of labels. I think what you're describing, the N-word, other. And I think historically, any ethnic group, there's going to be a pejorative attached to them, and how much freight that carries, because it seems like every negative possible connotation can be put into one single word and dumped on somebody. And I think that's one of the things, in terms of differences, I think that's something that's I've always had to wrestle with. I need to view those words with the weight that they should have.
Yeah.
And the fear they provoke.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's interesting. Again, growing up in the South, when I moved up here, I was early 20s. Grew up in the South, lived in the South all my life, and it was interesting. One of the things that really shaped or affected me was I grew up here, and nobody talked about the Civil War. Like, it just wasn't relevant.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I grew up where everything between statues and and names of streets and everything else, everything has a Civil War reference. And it was shocking to me that the Civil War didn't matter up here. Well, because the North won, and it wasn't generally fought up here. And so I had this awareness of how much I was shaped by a sense of growing up in a part of the country that had lost a war.
That's interesting.
And that's, people, again, it's one of those things where you want to think the Civil War issues are all race issues, but they're much more complicated than that. They have to do with being, again, thinking from a deeply embedded Southerner,
Right.
from being an occupied people, which is what happened after the Civil War.
Yeah.
And again, we'll talk more about history and those kind of things. But that was something that I realized, nobody up here understand what it was lost to lose a war until Vietnam, in a sense. And so it was part of the Southern perspective on life. And so I came up here and I realized, okay, that's very different, and I'm having to adjust to that. And we were very, like, I tell people one time, it just tells you, my mentality. Georgia Bulldogs played Notre Dame in 1980 national championship game, won 17-10. Herschel Walker. But up until that time, in 1980, I was a junior in college, and I thought Notre Dame was in Boston. Like, if you don't know, it's in Indiana. yes. So picture this. Here's a guy. I'm a college junior, right? And I looked on the map, and Notre Dame is like in the middle of the country. Why? Because I just thought it was Yankee.
Yeah.
And everything Yankee is up that direction.
Yes.
Like, I'd never been up here, and so to me it was all just, there's Yankees and then there's us, and that's this idea, so that idea of being a Southerner has a lot of connotations to it.
Yeah.
And complexities to it. And it informs how I interact over things.
Yeah.
Just one brief thing on race in particular. I don't think it's the same now as I'm sure it isn't the same now as it was, but Maynard Jackson, who was the mayor of Atlanta back in 70s, he said he's talking about racism and how being black is different in the North and the South, and he said, and I'm just gonna make sure I say this right, but he said in the South, talking about how whites view blacks, people don't care how close you are as long as you don't get too high. And in the North, they don't care how high you are,
Just don't.
as long as you get too close.
Wow.
And when I moved up, I thought, that's it, man.
Yeah.
It's different now. I mean, because because time has passed, but
Wow.
that was a huge thing for me. I realized, this is not like the North isn't a racist place. It just functions differently.
Functions differently.
It's like, don't get close to me.
Yeah.
And so those are some shaping influence that were never part of my thinking or even conscious ability to pull up.
Yeah.
But they just function there for me. And I know there are more.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. That's really good. Yeah, I feel like most of the things I don't do consciously, but are just kind of a part of, is like trying to make people feel comfortable around me. As a 6 foot, on a good day, 5'11", 3/4, however you want to say it. Like 300.
We'll call you 6. We'll call you 6.
Yeah,
man.
we'll do
for this
6.
for this podcast. You are 6 foot.
As you know, a 6 foot, 300-pound black man. There's
And you're
just,
260.
Yes, I like that. 6 foot,
Okay.
260.
There you go.
Let's run those numbers.
That's for the record.
It's just, I'm aware that my presence causes fear.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason why I'm always laughing all the time, because laughter is disarming and laughter humanizes people.
Yeah.
And
You mean I'm not that funny?
see, no, yeah, I'm just trying to humanize you. Oh no, I am a joyful guy, but that's good.
Well, keep it up because I like it.
But there's just certain things I do that I try to make me as approachable as possible, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
It was just a couple weeks ago. That was probably I don't know what day it is anymore. 2020 is such a strange year. It's probably a couple months ago now. But I had the police called on me when I was working out at a local high school, and I was working out on the track and things like that, and I had my kids with me by God's grace, and I was running on the track doing different things like that, and we were packing up, and the high school is like the track and the athletic fields are way in the back. It's a big high school, and I see these police officers flying down the road, and they pull over into the across the parking lot from me, and I'm just like, okay, like there was one other older gentleman in the parking lot. He was on his phone earlier, and in those moments, like I just immediately go to, okay, how can I humanize myself? So I had my cute little girls, Eleanor and Charlotte, get out of the car. I had like their tricycle and their bikes, and so I'm like essentially holding them up in the air as I'm putting them into the back of the vehicle, just to show them like I've got my kids here. Like I don't know why you were called, but I'm not dangerous. And by God's grace, like the police officers hopped out of the vehicle, they looked at me intently, and then they shuffled papers in the back of the vehicle and then drove off. And I was grateful that they kind of saw and assessed the situation, and then decided this is not worth like following up on. And I want to assume the best. I want to have charitable judgment. Like maybe they did just decide to drive half a mile to the back of the high school and shuffle papers and then leave. But that's very unlikely. And then the gentleman who was leaving, and it was just us two, me and the other guy. The gentleman who was driving away, I tried to like look at him and wave goodbye, and he just like wouldn't even look me in the eyes, just head straight forward. And it's just one of those moments that's just frustrating. One of those moments that's just like, but also like a moment that I can't let like mess me up, because it's going to happen in a couple weeks anyway. We were, and it's helpful when I can have people to de-escalate the situation. So we were at Costco. It was probably about 3 weeks ago. Maybe it's a little bit longer now, but we were at Costco, and my son opened the door. He was 5 at the time. He's a little reckless, but he opened the door, and it tapped the vehicle next to us. And Bethany, my wife, who is white, was on the other side of the vehicle. And so all this lady saw was my son and me. And she exits her vehicle and gets in my face, telling me that your son just smashed my car with his door. What are you going to do about it? And, there's like a little tiny mark there, but, I knew not to engage. And so I was like, hey, Bethany, can you come speak with this lady? And so I just continued putting the things in the back, and Bethany comes around. The situation, her tone completely changes. Bethany goes over and like rubs out the little tiny mark on the car, and literally says, you guys need to watch your kid a little better. And then she got in the car and drove off. It's just like those little moments like that happen often. And I wish when Bethany got involved, it didn't completely change the scenario. But there's been so many that I'm just like, oh, I need the help of my wife here. Otherwise, this could be not a great situation. And I've got to keep myself in check in those moments of not just tapping into their anger and tapping into what else has been going on in her day. Hopefully it's not just my existence that has made her upset. I'm sure there's other things going on, but yeah, those kind of interactions and things.
Sure, yeah. And what it does for me is it just, it's a very tangible thing for me because it makes me aware that if I engage with a person of color, could be, I mean, again, we're probably not talking about black, white, but I think this can relate to our folks. I don't presume they're presently wrestling with any of that.
Yeah.
I presume they're kind of equilibrium.
Yeah.
I wouldn't presume that you came off of that. We have a conversation the next day and you're not processing that. To me, I'm dropping into a conversation and I'm just coming because, I saw something on the news or I saw this. And I think just even just that recognition that, and again, everybody processes things that hit our lives. But I think for me, just being reminded that particularly my black brothers and sisters, they have a habit of having to process things that I don't.
Yeah.
And they're often in the middle of that when we enter into conversations.
Yeah.
And so they're operating already from a sense of vulnerability that I don't have. And it's rare that I feel vulnerable in these conversations. I usually come from, in fact, my problem is I come from what I think is objective. Well, I just had this question.
Yes.
But it hits somebody else in a different way.
That's good.
So that's very sobering for me because I feel like, this isn't an exercise in philosophical dialogue over race.
Right.
It's not that. It's never that.
Man, yeah. That's huge. So and I think that's something that makes these things so difficult is there's people that want to engage these conversations that have the ability to just engage at a philosophical, political, etc. level. There's no real life implications for this person. So they're able to have this heady conversation, go into all the different directions of these kinds of things. But it's like for someone that's like dealing with that daily, it's hard to me to stay up in the stratosphere of philosophy. Like, because this is like, this is
which is where I want to keep it. I don't want to make it personal.
Right. Yes. Right? Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Personal is too personal.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And you know what? And even as we're talking about personal experience and how we're thinking through things, something that is so interesting to me is people can get so frustrated about, people saying representation matters and the difference that makes and things like that. People are like, representation doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah.
When you say representation, what do you mean?
Like, black people on TV or as characters or, Hispanic brothers and sisters in lead roles of movies and different things like that, or in books and cartoons. Like if you look at cartoons now, it's like the United Nations up in every single little click, and they're doing these things intentionally. And I've benefited from that happening, that Isaiah's going to be confused when he finds out George Washington is not like a large black man with a smooth, buttery voice. Like Hamilton's going to mess him up, man.
Yeah, that's for real, man.
It's so, but not just in that context, but also, just the toys that he's playing with. This dude's got Black Panther action figures. Like he's playing with an African king. Like you know what I mean? Those are categories that we just didn't have. Captain America is black in the comics right now. And even just
if I watch the last of that last movie, I'm thinking he's going to be again.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, but it's interesting because, I was actually just talking with someone about, I'm reading through the Chronicles of Narnia with my kids and we're reading, Horse and His Boy. Yeah. And the way they describe the bad guys, they talk a lot about their the skin colors and the skin tones and things like that. And he was asking okay, so how are you walking through this with your kids? And there's some parts there's some lines I would just kind of skip over about specific their brown skin. I'm just okay, I'm not gonna say that. Thanks, C.S. Lewis, but not right now. But it didn't worry me so much that he's got several books where Jesus is a brown dude. Mm-hmm. And he's watching superheroes who look a bit more like him, and so there is a bit of a joy in this whole so I guess I'm saying all that to say, like, people get so mad at that representation and all these different kinds of things. I was like, man, it's helping me raise my child in a way in which he's not constantly questioning his dignity. He's not constantly questioning his, and eventually we can get to the point where he'll understand theologically, by God's grace, hopefully, of the image of God in him and how that's where his dignity comes from. But it's nice for him to be able to look into the mirror and not think it's flawed.
Yeah.
His skin color. So
he gets to be 16 years old. What would you like
yeah.
for him to be able to look out at the world and see?
That's a decade away. let me think about
fast.
that. It is. I'm sure. Yeah, I would like for him. That's a really good question. What do I want Isaiah to look out in 10 years and see? I would love for him to see. Here it is. I would like him to see regularity in diversity. Not to the point where it's not even talked about, but to the point where it's recognized, celebrated, and that there's clear tie-ins, not to some sort of like worldly agenda where we're doing all this kind of thing, but the tie-ins of just like, dude, this is like kind of what the new heavens and the new earth are going to look like, where there's tie-ins of like, this is part of God's vision for the church, to be, for the gospel to go out in so many different nations. And by so many, I mean all tribes, all nations, all that kind of stuff. And that he would be able to celebrate and learn things about other cultures as well. And that would just be a part of what happens. I think that would bring joy to my little heart to see him just running around with a bunch of people, some that look like him, some that don't, some that look completely different, and them all to just love each other as we're supposed to.
Yeah, good. Yeah, what the thing that, and maybe just kind of turn a corner a little bit, the thing I've learned is the necessity to listen, to let people share their thoughts fully without looking to, so much of dialogue is not really dialogue. It's mutual monologue. It's okay. It's, I'll say this, then you say this. And a friend of mine at Risen Hope, we would have conversations, and he was very courageous in having him. He was teaching me a lot in having him. And, one of the things he said to me was, he said, if I'm talking to somebody, I'm talking to a white guy, and he wants to talk about race, I treat that as sincere. He's taken a step, and he said, but if I kind of know the kind of answers I'm going to get from him to let me know whether he really wants to have a conversation. And he said, so I'll ask him a few questions or say a couple of things just to see what he'll respond. And if I get certain responses, I'll just know, okay, I'm not going to open certain doors.
Exactly.
We'll have a conversation. But it's going to be kind of on these familiar things. Because the goal at that point is to get out without getting hurt. Both of us. Let's just not get into conflict. But it stays light. He says, if I get, people, if I hear a guy, he listens to what I say, and he's, again, the guy's really cool because he's not saying you need to validate everything I'm saying. But if you're willing to let me talk in a way that you don't start to back up of what I'm saying, then I feel like we can go deeper, and I'm willing to talk about my own issues.
Exactly.
But I don't want to bring my own issues to the table if you're going to bring my issues to the table.
Right. That's so good.
And so there are a couple of conversations I would watch his face and I'd say, I just did it, didn't I? Okay. Help me back up. Okay, good. And, so that I need that help. Because good. I don't know those things that make somebody sort of feel like, okay, we can have a conversation, but I'm going to keep it at a certain level. And when I had those conversations at a certain level, I could just as soon read. I don't need to talk. I could get that from somewhere else. Bang. So part of that is just, this idea of how do I listen? And I think it's a two-way street. So.
Let's let's bring it in a little bit because I think we're getting close to our time goal. But I think that's a huge point. Like, I'm just affected at hearing that brother talk about it, because that's another thing I don't realize that I do is you kind of test the waters, see where people are at, and we have to adjust the conversation accordingly to help maintain that kind of unity. And there are points where we can go deeper. There are points where we can do that. But if this person's coming to try and throw a haymaker and knock me out and question all my prejudgments I've put on other people and say all these kind of things, I'm like, man, we can't really talk about this right now. And people don't like hearing that. People don't like feeling that either. But listening is huge. And I think that can be one of the gigantic takeaways is sharing personal experience and listening to that personal experience, and not trying to either fact check that personal experience and not trying to, run it through a grid. Don't edit other people's personal experience, but that's listen. Good. And that's how we can empathize and grow in love in this.
Yeah. In one sense, and maybe closing off, when it comes to personal experience, personal experience is always subjectively understood. So it doesn't mean that what I experienced or the way I interpret what I experienced is always what I think it was. So we have to be humble that way.
Yes.
We also have to be humble, recognize that if somebody shares their personal experience, it's not for me to correct that.
Right.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Let's
accept that and let's find a way to converse about it so we can grow. So that's a little bit. We'll be back on that topic in the future.
Yeah.
So, man.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure, bud.